live in a very unstable world, a very uncertain world, where we cannot possibly predict where the threats will come for in the future, from what crazy totalitarian dictator might put a threat upon us, in a world when more countries are acquiring nuclear capabilities, and with it, of course, a nuclear threat. I think it would be highly irresponsible if we didn't update our own system. Of course, if I had my own way, I would wish that nuclear weapons had never been invented, but that, unfortunately, is not the case. It's there, it's with us. Our responsibility, as any Prime Minister would have to do of any government, would be to ensure that the security of his country is paramount and is first, and I'm afraid, very regretfully, that the nuclear deterrent must be upgraded.
Tony Benn, we need to deter the growing number of other countries that have got nuclear weapons. What do you say to that?
Well, Lady Olga Maitland's argument is an argument that could have been put forward by North Korea. If we have the bomb, the Americans won't attack us. But I think the first argument that has to be taken into account is the relevance of them. You see, America wasn't protected from 9/11 by nuclear weapons. They lost in Vietnam, though they had nuclear weapons. They're probably going to lose in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Russians lost in Afghanistan. And I think an awful lot of soldiers would rather have body armour and helicopters than see all this money wasted. So that's the defence argument. The other argument is very, very expensive, of course. But perhaps the most powerful argument of all is we don't have an independent deterrent. If the Prime Minister pressed the button to fire it, it wouldn't go anywhere unless the American president switched on the satellite system. So actually, it is a decision to bind yourself permanently with the United States on foreign and defence policy, and I'm not sure that's sensible.
All right, well, we'll come on to your third point in a moment, but Olga Maitland, on that first point, Tony Benn citing a number of conflicts where nuclear weapons don't appear to be much good. What are the circumstances in which you think having a nuclear weapon protects Britain?
Well, I think, in fact, Tony Benn is quite right to say there are threats to our society from terrorism, whereupon, of course, obviously nuclear weapons don't play a part. But what he is totally ignoring is that there are threats in the future we can't totally predict where they're coming from, and indeed the sheer escalation of nuclear weaponry in this world all over the globe is a genuine threat. And I think it would be totally irresponsible for us to fail to recognise it and face up to it. If, in fact, we followed Tony Benn's idea and got rid of our nuclear deterrent, that would be one-sided nuclear disarmament. How could any responsible country do that in the face of escalation elsewhere? What I'd love to see is everyone getting rid of their nuclear weapons in a way that's balanced and that is above all verifiable, that we can actually check and be sure. But I don't see that happening.
Okay, I mean,
and therefore I think we have...
Let's put that to Tony Benn, because the SALT 1, as Fridtjof limitation talks, is due to expire. If you want to get rid of the nuclear weapons, wouldn't it be the best thing to say, well, we're going to carry on with this unless others get rid of their weapons as well, Tony Benn? Wouldn't that be the rational way?
Well, the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to which we are committed, of course, is based on a commitment by nuclear powers to negotiate disarmament, which we haven't done. I mean, the Americans have moved into space. They've got their bunker-busting bombs, which have a nuclear component, depleted uranium. Britain's doing it. And I think Lady Olga Maitland is pointing out that the arguments that she puts forward would apply equally to Iran, not that they say they want them, to Saddam, to anybody in the world on that basis would have nuclear weapons. And I think it would be a more dangerous world, but also having them is useless. You can't use a nuclear bomb against a suicide bomber. So I think it's a defence argument, really, and I think we ought to look at it from many angles, but also we won't control them, so it's a complete illusion that we'll ever have them, because we don't.
Olga Maitland, do you believe that Trident is an independent nuclear deterrent, in the sense of genuinely independent, that if Tony Blair decided that he wanted to bomb Chicago, he could do so?
Well, I think that is a rather extraordinary kind of point to put.
That's the definition of independence,
it's our
isn't it?
sovereign independent deterrent. Yes, it's absolutely true. We do rely on technology from America, who are our greatest allies. So I don't regard that as a case. What I think is perhaps another point that perhaps Tony Blair might have looked at, if supposing Britain one-sidedly gave up our nuclear capability, that would mean we in Europe would have to rely on the French. I'm not sure that's really what is desirable all round. And I think
but the honest thing, wouldn't the sensible thing if we really want an independent deterrent is to do what the French do, spend more and build our own. At least that way we could say we have an independent foreign policy.
Well, I think the real point is to have an effective independent deterrent. The Americans are our allies, for goodness sake, and I suggest that they're going to veto anything we would want to do in the future is very speculative. You could carry on that argument forever. You could say, all right, go down the French route and spend more money in creating a totally independent system, but I don't think that's necessary. I think what we have to really look at is that it would be very irresponsible to inflict on our grandchildren 50 years from now a world in which they're not totally protected with that independent deterrent. That nuclear deterrent is effective now, sitting on the ground, silently patrolling the seas. That is our guarantor of our ultimate safety. And therefore, I think that it is totally right that we should continue to upgrade.
Tony Ben, I've got an equal time here. The final 30 seconds are yours.
Well, we don't have an independent deterrent. I mean, when I was Secretary of State, I had to go to Washington to get permission to enrich uranium. I appeared before the American Atomic Energy Commission as a British minister. We don't have it. But if it's our grandchildren, and I agree with that, I've got 10 of them, have a free vote in the House of Commons. Don't use the whips, because this is as big a decision as entering the European community, because it gives up our independence, as Olga Maitland says.
Well, I have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Full coverage of the Trident announcement on Sky News tomorrow.